Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, again for the opportunity to come here and to study your word, and we ask for your blessing on our time and certainly on all the service time today and our fellowship in between services and such. And Lord, we also think of this soldier Joshua, who is the son of one of Bob's honor flight board members, and he's in Kuwait. He's in Kuwait in a building that was hit, and haven't been able to communicate with him, Lord, and we just pray that for his safety and those of the other soldiers in the Middle East that have been targets from Iran, and those sailors on the ships and the pilots in the air and all the soldiers on the bases. And we just pray for their safety, Lord. And Father, again, we just ask that Joshua be safe and taken care of, and be able to communicate soon with his father. Now, Lord, again, we ask your blessing on this time here, and I pray that you would be glorified in all that we do today. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, last week we were in Daniel. By the way, go ahead and turn to Daniel chapter 2. And we were talking about that Nebuchadnezzar had this dream, and he wanted it interpreted, but he didn't trust the wise men and such in Babylon, and to prove that they could accurately interpret the dream, he asked them to first tell them the dream instead of him telling them the dream. And they couldn't do it. Nebuchadnezzar realized that they were charlatans, and in his anger had decided that all the wise men of Babylon should be executed, which included Daniel and his three friends who were not there at the time. And when the soldiers came to take Daniel to kill him, Daniel asked for an explanation and was given it. He asked for time to be able to go into Nebuchadnezzar and interpret the dream for him that was given to him. And last week we saw that, when we were looking at chapter 2, that he did tell the dream accurately to Nebuchadnezzar. And so today what we're going to look at is the interpretation of the dream that Daniel gives. And remember, the dream he had was of this image, this image that was fierce looking and had different parts of the body, different colors, and this stone came into the statue and hit it in the feet and crumbled the whole statue. But that's not the interpretation, that's just the dream. So today what we're going to look at is the interpretation that Daniel gives. So we left off at Daniel chapter 2, and we're going to start today in verse 36 and go through verse 45. So Daniel chapter 2, verse 36. Now I want to remind you, before we start reading, that Daniel, when he first came before the king, he said, let me find it, he said that God had given him a vision of what was to come. So this dream he had was some kind of prophecy. Okay? So in verse 36, he says, this is Daniel talking, "This was the dream. Now we will tell the king its interpretation. You, O king, the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, and the might, and the glory." Again, this I want to remind you, this shows where Daniel is repeatedly talking about in the book of Daniel, and we're only in chapter 2. This is at least the fourth time that Daniel is attributing events that have happened to God's direction. Okay, God has given him the kingdom, the power, the might, and the glory. Verse 38, "And into whose hands he has given, wherever they dwell, the children of man, the beasts of the field, the birds of the heavens, making you rule over them all. You are the head of gold." So that's why I wanted you guys to have the colored version of this, is because, first of all, he identifies that Nebuchadnezzar is the head here, this golden part. Okay? He goes on and he says, "Another kingdom inferior to you shall arise after you, and yet a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, because iron breaks into pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, it shall break and crush all these." So there's several different kingdoms. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different kingdoms that Daniel says this statue represents, this image represents. Verse 41, "And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle." So this is the fourth kingdom that he's talking about here. "As you saw the iron mixed with the soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed, nor shall the kingdom be left to another people. It shall break in pieces all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever, just as you saw that a stone was cut from a mountain by no human hand, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. A great God has made known to the king what shall be after this." And after this, I think he's saying after right now. "The dream is certain, and its interpretation sure." So we're going to look at this packet because this packet talks about this interpretation. And so we're going to go into that. But before we do that, there is another vision in chapter 7, which is closely related to this vision. So I want to flip over there and read that. So let's go to chapter 7, verse 1. And it says, "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon," so this is following Nebuchadnezzar, "Daniel saw a dream and vision in his head as he lay in bed." So this is Daniel's dream. "Then he wrote down the dream and told the sum of the matter. Daniel declared, 'I saw in my vision by night, and behold,
the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. And four great beasts came up out of the sea, different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. And the mind of a man was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." After this I looked, and behold, another, like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night vision, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left in its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in the horn were the eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking of great things. Okay, so just before we start looking at Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and we're also going to tie it into these 4 beasts in the dreams that Daniel saw. What can you tell me that you see is kind of similar between Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's dream? This isn't a trick question. What are some of the similar things? What's that? A lot of power? Is that what you said? Okay. All right. All right. Anything else? What's that? 4 different groups. Nebuchadnezzar's dream had 4 groups, which Daniel identified as empires. Okay. And Daniel's dream had 4 different beasts. Okay. Anything else? There were some similarities, like the 4th beast that Daniel saw said that he had said something like he could stomp things, and it was made of iron and stuff, just like the 4th part of the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw. So there's some similarities there and everything. So what I'm suggesting is that Nebuchadnezzar's dream and Daniel's dream were pretty much one and the same. They were talking about 4 different empires that were going to rise up. And when we look at this packet at the interpretation of the dreams, I will tell you that it looks very clear that, by the way, this is what we're going to look at here. This is what theologians believe is the reality of those dreams. Okay, it's not what the Bible says. Well, it takes the information that Daniel stated here, and it's looking at real life, what happened in history. And to me, it's totally obvious that the first 3 empires that it talks about definitely have already occurred. And we'll look at that. And then the 4th empire has partially occurred and perhaps will once again rise again. But we'll look at that. So when I gave you this packet originally, I didn't
I blocked out that center part here. So let's turn the page to show the actual thing. So Angie, you didn't get the first page, so that's right where I want to be. No, I want to be right there. So let's look in here. The statue in the book of Daniel. By the way, this was published by Rose Publishing. They have a series of books, and I think they're really good reference books. They have a book that's just on maps of the ancient times, and they even have a book that takes the maps and you can overlay on it what the current world is, so you can see like a map of the Babylonian Empire, and then you flick this little clear sheet on here and it has the outline of all the current nations today, so you can see that, oh, look, the Babylonian Empire was where Iraq is today, and things like that. So, but then Rose has other things. Carl, I noticed, used a lot of the Rose stuff when he was doing his series on Christ revealed in the Old Testament. There was a lot of things he took from there. So they're really good books. I said I think it would be worth looking at. We've even seen the books at the Apple Orchard out by Charlevoix, the big one. Friskies, yeah, in the gift shop there, they have those books. Anyway, so let's look at this. So on the first one, this is what we read in Daniel 2:26 through 45, and actually we didn't go that far yet, but the head was of fine gold, and theologians say it represents the Babylonian Empire. That's not a guess, because Daniel specifically said, this is you, Nebuchadnezzar, and the idea is it's not personally Nebuchadnezzar, but it's Nebuchadnezzar's empire, okay? The chest and arms were of silver, and many believe that that's the Medo-Persian Empire that came right after the Babylonian Empire from 539 to 332 BC. Then the belly and thighs of bronze, they say represent the Greek Empire, and when we look at the detail of this, I would say there's no doubt that it does. And you'll see when we get to that why I say that. The legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay. Many scholars believe that this refers to the Roman Empire, and we'll talk a little more about that when we get to it, because the Roman Empire was different from all these other empires, and we'll talk about that. And then the last thing was the stone, and theologians believe that this is the everlasting kingdom of God. Okay. And by the way, they're not going out on a lark on this. I think they're pretty accurate in their description. So let's go to the next page. So let's look at the head of fine gold, which was the Babylonian Empire, and they give this little historical and biblical background, and pardon me for just reading to you here, but it's worth bringing it out right now, But look at that, under historical, well, first of all, let's look at the map there, okay? You see where it says Babylonia, and you see two rivers on the map? Those two rivers would be the Euphrates River and the Tigris River. And that's where modern-day Iraq is today. And then you can see where it says Judah there, and you see something just to the left of Judah there. The top little circle would be the Sea of Galilee, and then the line underneath it would be the Jordan River, and then the circle underneath it is the Dead Sea. So it says Judah there, but it says Judah on the right-hand side, but Judah's really on the left-hand side. Okay?
It wasn't spaced.
Yeah, there wasn't space to.
To put the name where it actually was.
Yeah, and then obvious, or not, maybe not obvious to people, but the big blue body of water to the right of, or to the left of Judah would be the Mediterranean Sea, and you can see islands there, like the island closest to Judah is Cyprus, and I believe that's Crete. That's over underneath Greece, and so on and so on. But you can see the scope of the Babylonian Empire. And let's look at what it says in the historical and biblical background. It says about 600 years before Jesus was born, Babylonia, which is Iraq today, was the most powerful and wealthy kingdom in the Middle East. The next bullet point tells us that Daniel and others were taken captive to Babylon to serve in his court. And that Nebuchadnezzar also took some of the sacred objects and vessels from the temple. You remember we read that in chapter 1. One night, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. The king threatened to kill the advisors if they cannot tell him both the dreams and the interpretation, of which, of course, they couldn't. And then Daniel asked the king for some time to interpret, and then after he prayed, God revealed the dream to him. And then the next bullet point, the dream shows the statue, and then it just tells what the interpretation is, which we already looked at on the first page. And then the last bullet point, Daniel told King Nebuchadnezzar the dream and interpreted it. And I don't want to read the last part because we haven't talked about that yet, so don't read it. Don't read that the king made Daniel rule over Babylon. Okay? All right. Let's go down here where it says head of the statue. So this is Babylon. The head of the statue made from fine gold represents the kingdom of Babylonia, which the Lord gave King Nebuchadnezzar to rule. The Lord did. All right? The gold symbolized the superior power of Babylonia. You're going to notice, if it didn't occur to you already, you're going to notice as Daniel interprets the different pieces of the statue, the head, like in the human body, when we see each other, how do we know that that's Angie and that's Bob and that's Donna? We know because of their head. I mean, we don't go. Who is this? Let me look at their feet. Oh, no, it's not the feet. It's the head that makes us realize. So and the head is where the brain is, and also so theoretically it's the most important part of the body. If you didn't have your head, you're not walking around too much. So the head supersedes the chest supersedes the thigh supersedes the legs, and so on and so on. But what you'll notice too is when he described the statue, the things that they were made out of were different too. The head was made out of gold. Gold's the most valuable, the most superior. The next part, the chest, was made of silver, and silver is not as valuable as gold is, and it continues that all the way down. The materials that these pieces are made out of are less valuable, of less importance, less significance, and that is significant in interpreting all this. So the gold symbolized the superior power of Babylonia. Next bullet point, eventually Babylonia would be destroyed by an inferior kingdom. Okay, so this next the next kingdom that destroys it is not politically, militarily as powerful as Babylon was. Yes,
Just to
Pastor.
point out that I would say that goal is that the decreasing value of the metals demonstrates the authority that the ruler of each respective realm had.
Okay.
So in Nebuchadnezzar's case, or in this very chapter, if he wants to destroy all of the wise men of Babylon, he just says, you're done. And if he wants to change his mind, if he changes his mind at the end, he says, okay, we're not going to do that. You remember the story of Daniel and the lion's den? Darius couldn't change because now, in other words, his authority is less. What about Rome? What about Greece? Well, again, it's a step lower.
Don't go too far with that on Greece.
It's a democracy. And so, in other words, my point is,
Yeah.
the decreasing value of the metals demonstrates the increasing democratic nature, the increasing limited nature of those in charge.
Okay, all right, excellent. All right, so the final bullet point there, when Nebuchadnezzar heard Daniel's interpretation, he said, well, again, we haven't talked about this yet, but he was impressed that he was able to reveal the mystery and recognize the God of Daniel as being the one who enabled this to happen. Where the other magicians and soothsayers and whatever, they represented their gods who couldn't offer this interpretation. You look like you have a comment to make, Carl.
It's true that you said that, but when we get to the next chapter, it hadn't really taken hold yet. It doesn't take hold through that later.
Which is, I think, why people have this debate about Nebuchadnezzar. Did he convert or not? You know,
Not in this chapter.
yeah, not in this chapter.
Not in this chapter. I don't think you can necessarily the next one.
Yeah, but I'm not totally convinced. All right, so now in Daniel's vision, Daniel's first beast that he saw, I would say compares with this the head in Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Look what it says here. More than 50 years after King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel had a vision about the four great beasts. They were like a lion with eagle's wings, a bear, a leopard, and a terrifying, powerful beast. The four beasts are four kingdoms, and Nebuchadnezzar of the king of Babylon is compared to a lion in Jeremiah 4:7. Well, that's what he saw here. That's what Daniel saw, was the lion. And also in Jeremiah 50:44, and he was compared to an eagle in Ezekiel 17:3 and 11 through 12. So there's this idea that this lion and the wings and everything seem to have a biblical connection with Nebuchadnezzar. Images of the lion with eagle's wings were popular in Babylonia and can be found on ancient Babylonian architecture and currency. So there seems to be a connection between that his vision and Nebuchadnezzar's vision of the head here are one and the same. All right, let's flip over to the next page. Now we have the chest and arms of silver, and theologians tend to believe that was the next great empire, which is the Medo-Persian Empire. Now I have to just preface this a little bit, that the Medes and the Persians, they were actually two different ethnic groups that combined their empire together. And when they first came together, the Medes seemed to have more dominance. But as the empire continued on, the Persians tend to rise up and have more dominance through most of the time of the empire. So lots of times people don't even say the Medo-Persian Empire, they just say the Persian Empire. But the fact is that this was a two minor empires that pooled together and created this one great empire. And you can see that the Persian Empire is much bigger than what the Babylonian Empire was. You can see it still encompasses the area that was Babylon. It still encompasses Judah and Egypt, but extends now even farther east into Libya, into Lydia and Greece, and of course in Media and Persia. And by the way, Persia is modern-day Iran, okay?
King Cyrus the Great was descended from both the Medes and the Persians. He is the reason why it became a single empire. One side of his lineage comes from the Persians and the other side comes
Okay.
from so that's how they ended up as one empire.
Wow, a marriage formed a political relationship. How novel. Never happened. All right, so let's look at the historical background here. Okay, in 59 BC, Darius the Mede took Babylon without a fight. By 538, Mesopotamia and Judah were under Persian rule, and later the Persians gained control of Egypt and Libya. King Cyrus and the other kings of the Persian Empire developed this policy that, unlike Babylon, they allowed people the freedom to worship their own gods and live in their own ways. Babylon was trying to restrict that. That's why they plucked people away. That's why they took part of the items from the temple. They didn't want a group of Jews all together living their Jewish lives, doing their Jewish worship, because that could cause a rebellion against them. But the Persians had a more tolerant view, unlike modern-day Iran.
Cyrus and Darius are ruling together. Darius is actually a lesser king under Cyrus.
Okay.
So if you're wondering when Daniel gets some things by Darius and some things by Cyrus, those are equivalent dates.
So then in 538 BC, Cyrus issued a decree ordering the restoration of the Jewish community. Jews were allowed to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. That's Zerubbabel, Ezra, Nehemiah. That was all that area where they came back and rebuilt the temple, rebuilt the city. The Persians paid to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, according to Ezra 6:8. And the vessels that were taken by Nebuchadnezzar were returned. And in 457 BC, Artaxerxes of Persia sent Ezra to Judah for religious reform and spiritual guidance. And then Nehemiah governed Judah from 444 to 430. While in Judah, Nehemiah rebuilt the walls of the city. So the temple was rebuilt first, and then the walls of the city were rebuilt to protect it, and Jerusalem is starting to become a modern city again at that time. All right, because remember in 586, it was sacked by by the Babylonians. All right. So let's look at the chest and the arms of the statue particularly. So the chest and the arms made of silver represents the kingdom of Medo-Persia, which is the second power that would rise after Babylonia. This is an historical fact. All right. Silver, which is of lesser value than gold, symbolizes the inferior status of Medo-Persia to Babylonia. Eventually, Persians would be conquered by another kingdom. Let's look at Daniel's vision. His next beast that he saw was a bear. And Daniel's vision of the beast looks like a bear. The bear was raised on one side, which may. So when I'm thinking what that means is like three legs are on the ground and one leg's up like this, you know. So the bear was raised on one side, which may illustrate the dominance of Persia over Media. Okay, may. It had three ribs in its mouth, which may have illustrated the three major empires Persia conquered: Babylon, Egypt, and Lydia. And then the bear was commanded to devour much flesh, which may have been a reference to Persia's military expansion through the ancient world. All right. Again, these are just, some things are absolute facts, like Medo-Persia did rise up and overtake Babylon. That's a fact. These other things are conjectures that people are making based on these facts. All right. So that's the second one. Now let's go and look at the third one. The belly and the thighs of bronze. And this is the Greek Empire. And you can see that the empire basically assumed the same land area as what the Persian Empire had. It extends over on the right-hand side of the map. You can see it extended a little more into the north of Media, and also extended farther west on the other side into Greece, but pretty much has a very similar footprint as what the Persian Empire had. Pardon me? Yeah, there seems to be a little less there, but okay. And of course, in these times, where boundaries exactly were isn't like today, where you know that I'm in Belgium, I'm in France. I mean, it's it's not quite like that now. Back then, Okay, so let's look at the historical and biblical background. So in 332, Alexander the Great of Greece conquered the kingdom of Persia and expanded his kingdom as far east as the Indus River, and that, I assume, is this river right here at the very eastern edge of the empire. Alexander the Great brought with him rapid Hellenization, that is, the spread of Greek culture, language, and religion into the entire civilized world at that time. That is why during New Testament times the people spoke Greek, is because Alexander the Great and the Greeks there intentionally infused that into their empire, whereas it wasn't so much with the Persians and the Babylonians. Okay, but they intentionally infused these Hellenistic lifestyles and culture and stuff like that into the area. And it's, to me, it's obvious that this is all God ordained because with everybody speaking Greek, when the New Testament writers wrote, their audience was greatly expanded. If they would have been writing in Aramaic, it just would have been more of a localized recipients here. But speaking Greek, it went to a much wider area of people. So after, third bullet point says, after Alexander's death in 323 BC, and he was pretty young. He was only about 33 years old or something like that at that time. I'd like to read about him. He seemed to be quite an amazing guy for such a young individual. But anyway, after Alexander's death in 323 BC, his generals fought over the conquered land, and after 40 years of internal struggles here, 4 major divisions emerged: Egypt, Syria, Macedonia, and Pergamum. So the empire was divided up amongst these 4 generals, these 4 kings. It was still the Greek Empire, but it was, you know, there was 4 different sections of it. And then, and by the way, this is the only empire of these 4 major empires that during the time of the empire, there were no biblical books written during this time. This is the, pardon me? The silent years, or the intertestamental period. These 400, this period of 400 years between when God gave the last revelation from the Old Testament, which was Malachi, and the first revelation from the New Testament, which was about 53 AD or something like that. This is the 400 years in between. And that's when this empire occurred. So this empire did not occur during the biblical times, but it was mentioned in biblical times. And we'll see that even as we go farther into Daniel, that activities that occurred during the Greek Empire were mentioned here. Okay, so it goes on, and it says, over 150 years, Jews were either under the control of, how do you say that, Ptolemies, or Seleucids? Seleucids? Okay. So these were the 2 Greek kingdoms that were right next to each other, and you know, their areas expanded and contracted over time, and so that's what it's saying, that the Jews were under different ones at different times. From 175 to 163 BC, there was a ruler, Antiochus IV, and he tried to force the Jews to abandon their laws and adapt Greek culture, and he was very ruthless. He was very ruthless to them. And in 167 BC, he desecrated the temple by sacrificing a pig to the Greek god Zeus. How do you think the Jews felt about him? They did, for some reason, they did not like him. And in fact, how many people have ever heard of Judas Maccabees? Okay. Or the Maccabees rebellion, or whatever. This was because of this friction between the Greeks and the Jews, because of this there was a revolt. And it says here that a Jewish priest named Judas Maccabees led the revolt. And the last bullet point, Maccabees won in 164 BC. The temple was cleansed and rededicated and is celebrated every year as Hanukkah.
First Maccabees is a record of the events of Antiochus Epiphanes and all of that era.
Which First Maccabees is a book of the Apocrypha.
Yeah, it's a book of the Apocrypha. It's definitely not inspired, but make no mistake, it's actually good history and it's reliable.
Yes. And this, from the time of the Jewish exile in 586 until the current Jewish state in 1948, this short period of time here under the Maccabees is the only time that Israel was truly independent. All these other times they've been under someone else's subject. All right. So let's go down here, the belly and the thighs of the statue. The belly and the thighs, made of bronze, represents the kingdom of Greece, the third kingdom that would be extended throughout the known world. Bronze was of lesser value than silver, symbolizing its Greek's inferiority to Persia. Eventually, Greece would be conquered by another kingdom. Daniel's vision of the leopard with four heads, I'm looking at the beast now, the leopard from Daniel's dream. Daniel's vision of the leopard with the four heads and the four wings may represent the kingdom of Greece. The four wings may illustrate the spread of Alexander's great conquest. The four heads may represent the division of Alexander's kingdom into four provinces after Alexander's death. Okay, so I really should stop here, but I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks, and I just want to real quickly do the next one, okay, if I can do it quickly. So the next one is the legs of iron and the feet of iron and clay, and many believe that this is the Roman Empire, which is the next great empire that came after Greece. Okay, so scholars suggest the Fourth Empire is the Roman Empire. However, the Bible does not specifically identify this kingdom as Rome. In 63 BC, the Romans conquered Jerusalem. Julius Caesar then was assassinated by Brutus in 44 BC. 2 years later, Octavian and Mark Antony defeated Brutus. So there's all this internal infighting going on within the empire. Okay, so they defeated it, and then in 27 BC, Octavian, also known as Caesar Augustus, became the first Roman emperor. And during his reign, Herod the Great began to refurbish the Temple of Jerusalem. Herod was a local king that the empire allowed to rule there. So he was a local king under, he had Judea, Samaria, and Galilee. Because Israel, by that time, was divided up in those three regions. Okay? All right? And Herod ruled over those three regions, plus some other regions around it. Yes, Kim? Say that again?
Yes, that's that.
Oh, yeah. Herod the Great. Yeah, he was the king at the time of Jesus' birth. In fact, we're going to see that in just a second here. During his reign, Herod refurbished the temple. Okay. And Jesus was born in Bethlehem somewhere around 6 to 4 BC. In 6 AD,
Judea became a Roman province ruled by the governor. And the reason they did that is because, they allowed, Herod the Great died, and his kingdom was divided up between three of his sons. And Archelaus was the ruler over Judea, and he was really ruthless, and even to the point where Rome wasn't pleased with him. So they snatched the kingdom from him and installed their own governor. They allowed foreign kings to rule as long as they kept the peace and all that, but when things were not going well, and they felt that they needed to exact their own more direct rule, that's when they set up their governorship there. All right? All right. So, Jesus then was crucified by the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate, and 3 days after his death, he rose from the dead and was seen by more than 500 people somewhere around AD 30. In AD 70, the Romans destroyed the Jewish temple and Jerusalem. And that's a historical fact. And over time, the Roman Empire weakened due to conflict within its borders, invaders attacking it from the outside. And it says that the Roman Empire fell in AD 476. To me, the empire really never fell. It just...
fell apart.
Yeah, it faded. Within it, it became different states of Europe, and it really didn't have a conqueror come in and destroy it.
Just like the Greek Empire was immediately broken up into 4 separate empires, but by Daniel's thinking did not become a 4th empire. It was still 3rd, even though immediately after Alexander the Great's death, it was no longer one empire.
Right, but it still had the Hellenistic culture, and it did have that
Right.
commonality.
And
It also goes to show what that's what you said earlier about lesser authority.
Yeah.
Because following one empire, there were 4 rulers in different areas.
Yep.
So there was one person.
So just real quick, under legs and feet of the statue. The legs were made of iron, and the feet were made of a mixture of both iron and clay. The legs of the iron suggest that the kingdom would be strong as iron and would break, smash, and crush things. But the kingdom would be a divided kingdom, different from the others, both strong and weak, like iron is strong and clay is brittle. And the kingdom would have a mixture of people who would not be united. Just like the Jews were never united with Rome at all.
I suggest the rise of the West since the Middle Ages is a reflection of the feat of iron and clay.
Yeah.
That is, the West is not a 5th empire separate from Rome. That it is part. That's why even though Daniel has 5 different metal amalgamies, there's only 4.
Right.
The 5th one, the iron and clay, is not a 5th empire.
Right.
It's just part of the 4th.
The brittleness of the
rise
4th
of the
empire.
West is, I think, the feat of iron and clay, unless Jesus really isn't coming back for a very long
Yeah.
time.
Okay, real quickly, the vision of the beast then. Daniel saw this 4th terrifying beast that had 10 horns and iron teeth. It had the 10 horns are 10 kings that would rise from the kingdom, and after them another man, a little horn, with eyes and mouth that both would speak against God and persecute God's people, and 3 of the first horns would be uprooted, and eventually the terrifying beast would be thrown into a blazing fire. This is the Antichrist it's talking about. So the theory is, if the Roman Empire never really faded out,
in the times of the tribulation, the idea is that these leaders are rising up from the ashes of the old Roman Empire. Okay? We're going to stop here. I'm sorry I took long, but I wanted to get through those because I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. Kim and I are going to be gone for 2 weeks. Carl's going to do Sunday school, and when I come back, please bring these again because we've got to talk about this stone here.
And I did have mine, so
Okay.
I'll give that to you.
All right. All right. That's it. Let's, Carl, would you close us in prayer?
Father, again, as we come to you, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the class we've had. We pray now, Lord, as we study these, we'll learn from them. Pray now as Paul and Kim will be gone for the next couple of weeks. You'll give them safety and bring back safely to us. Give us a good day for the rest of the day. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you.